Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the show. Joining Mike and I tonight are two very special guests. I'm very excited to speak to them. David Weatherly and Dave Spink. And now I know David. I haven't spoken to him for a while. I first met him at the Texas Bigfoot Conference. And I was impressed with the breadth of knowledge and the amount of different investigations he's done. And both of them form the Society of the Supernatural. Both of them are accomplished authors. I'm going to talk about their books later on. And both of them investigate a variety of topics, anything from cryptozoological, mystery creatures, through to paranormal and supernatural topics. So welcome, gentlemen, on behalf of Mike and I. Thank you for being on the show tonight.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Excellent. Now, one of the things that we've got a number of topics both of us would like to discuss. One of the things that I was interested in, I know you wrote a book, David, about this, was the black-eyed children phenomenon. I wondered if either of you, whoever would first like to speak, would tell us a little bit about what black-eyed children are.
Yeah, that
Go
was
ahead,
my
David.
book, and it's there's a big question mark hanging over exactly what these things are. Quite honestly, the book kind of examines a wide range of possibilities to explain what these sightings are. I cover the whole aspect of whether or not they are simply an urban legend, which a lot of people still mistakenly think this is just an urban myth or an urban legend born on the internet, but it's not. There are far too many sightings at this point. And the sightings actually predate the internet by quite a bit. I delve into that in the book also. The weird thing about this phenomena is that there are so many other areas that the black-eyed children have things in common with. For instance, a lot of people believe that they are some kind of alien-human hybrid. Simply because of the appearance and some of the other aspects of the encounters. But then what's equally popular is the idea that they are some kind of a demonic or evil entity that is coming through into our world. So it really is quite a fascinating phenomenon. They share things in common with the Men in Black and a wide range of other things. Typically, when these kids show up, they try to gain entrance into the victim's home or place of business or even vehicles. And they do this by issuing a set of very strange, sort of monotone requests. They never barge into someone's home. They simply entice the person into inviting them inside. And some people think that there is attempted mind control or hypnosis going on in some of the cases. But either way, these things, I don't believe they're really children at all. They try to elicit an invitation inside. And that, of course, harkens back to classic demonology and even vampire lore that, something evil needs to be invited in.
Yeah, I was going to make that point because I was interested in that because traditionally in the old Dracula films, the vampire always has to be invited in before he can enact any of his powers. I mean, this might be a very basic question, but I know people will be listening thinking, black-eyed children, what? Could you describe the phenomenon of what if I was to meet a black-eyed child? What would I expect to see?
Well, sure. Actually, what I can do is briefly tell you about the Brian Bethel encounter because that one is kind of iconic. And it really is the one that set off the modern wave of these encounters. 1997, a gentleman named Brian Bethel in Amarillo, Texas, went down to write a check and drop it in an after-hours payment box. He was sitting in his vehicle in front of a strip center, writing the check out, and these two boys approached his car. Now, Bethel was not in a bad neighborhood or anything like that, but for some reason he initially felt uneasy. So when the kids approached his vehicle, he only put the window down just a little bit in order to hear what they wanted. And they approached his car. They didn't make direct eye contact immediately. They were dressed in sort of normal, nondescript clothing, jeans and hoodies. And they said, "Hey, miss, we want to see a movie. We need our money." And they began to just speak in this odd manner, requesting that Bethel take them back to see their mother, which they emphasized. And as the encounter begins to unfold, Brian, his nervousness, it begins to grow. His unease becomes outright nervousness, and he sort of focuses in to see these kids more clearly. And when he does, he realizes that these children have solid black eyes. Now, there's no whites at all showing. There's no color. The entire sclera is black. And that, again, harkens back to this classical depiction of, for instance, the alien grays, just these big black sort of shiny orbs glaring back at you. And their skin is usually described as being very pale, which sets the eyes off, of course, a little bit more. This eye contact sent Bethel over the edge, and his flight response kicked in. He threw his car into gear, he backed away, and he drove away as quickly as he could. Now, as he backed out of the space, he looked in his rearview mirror and found that the children had vanished. So Bethel went and posted this account. Bear in mind, this was 1997, so the Internet was a very different beast at that time. And there were some social, forums and so forth and chat rooms, and he posted his account, and the response was overwhelming because people were either very intrigued and fascinated, or they started posting, oh my God, I've seen something similar to this, and this is what happened to me. So, as I said, Bethel's encounter, because he was the first one to post it in such a public forum, it sort of marks the modern era of these encounters, and since then it has sort of steamrolled, and there have been hundreds, perhaps thousands of accounts that have followed. The typical hallmarks are almost always there. These children are described as having very pale or pasty-looking skin. Some people say it looks unnatural or artificial. Their eyes are solid black. They speak in a very monotone manner, and they're always trying to get something. They're always trying to get entrance, and they use different phrases to try to achieve that. They'll say that they need to use the phone, or they want to come in to visit, or whatnot. And no one ever knows these children from anywhere. They're complete strangers, but it doesn't stop the bizarre statements from being issued.
Now, there's a number of obviously that's a very useful description, but there's a number of things that bring to mind. Obviously, now if I'm adopting the skeptical position, and I must, I think some of the time I might say, well, is this an urban myth phenomenon? Are these things actually real? Obviously, you did the investigation. Do you think that this is an example of popular culture spawning something that isn't credible, or do you think there's something to this? And if so, what are black-eyed children?
Oh, I definitely think there's something to it. That's why I really delved into looking into it. Now, admittedly, when I first heard the stories in the 90s after Bethel's account, I thought it was pretty fascinating, and I sort of filed it away, in the catalog of phenomena, if you will, in my brain, and thought, wow, this is interesting. We'll see what happens with it. And then a few more encounters were posted over the years and became very popular. It wasn't until I started meeting some people that were reporting encounters with these things that I looked at it in a different way and became very intrigued. And the more I delved into it, the more fascinating it became, simply because of the number of correlations with other aspects of the paranormal or supernatural field. So one of the things I did initially when I researched for the book, and this was, like 7-8 years ago, something like that now, when I really set out to write the book, was I looked at all the possible explanations. Of course, the skeptics, even back then, were proclaiming that it was all a hoax, as they always say. and and or that it was something, it was a medical condition or so forth. And I cover the whole skeptical angle in the book, I think pretty thoroughly. And I found that the most common things that the people who found these reports dubious were saying were, one, that it was a medical condition. So naturally, I went and spoke to doctors and physicians and found out, if that was even a potential. And the short answer is no, it's not. And then there were explanations, aside from the hoax, of course. The other one was, the skeptics would immediately say, well, it's drugs. It's a bunch of kids on drugs. And, of course, again, from speaking with, medical professionals and law enforcement, there's no known drug that turns your eye solid black. And, so back then those explanations certainly didn't hold any water. So I believe, through my research and honestly through interviewing people who had encountered these things, it equates to talking to a trauma victim. The people who have encountered these things and are being genuine in their reports, they are incredibly traumatized and disturbed by encountering these things. So I don't for a moment believe that, it's all a hoax. As with anything else in our field, are there some hoax cases? Yeah, most likely. But, that's something we have to deal with as investigators.
No, of course, and I accept that. I mean, I'm interested in themselves. Obviously, I've done a little bit of research on this, but nothing like you. So what do you think they are then? If you had to put your money on it, what are they?
Well, my personal opinion is that they are something interdimensional that's manifesting here. And, that sort of comes from my background, having been in this field for so many years, and also as a parallel studying with different elders from various shamanic traditions. I hear reports that are thousands of years old from oral traditions that talk about, things that can come over from another level of existence, another dimension, if you will. And, of course, quantum science has now come full circle and is actively talking about other dimensions of existence. So, the big question is, well, just because we can't get there doesn't mean that something that is there can't get here. And that's my approach to it.
Now, that's an interesting point. Just one last thing, and I just want to widen it up and obviously include both of you in these comments. Is these things are malevolent and possibly dimensional? That's what you're saying. Now, how do you both feel that they? Obviously, you investigate many things, and we could talk for hours, but we were on limited time, so I'm just cherry picking a few topics tonight. Forgive me. But how do they link in then? You mentioned very briefly the Greys, and just again for our listeners, Greys, were you talking about aliens? How do you think, or do they link in with aliens, with Grey aliens? And if so, what's their agenda?
Wow, that's a topic for the whole evening right there. I could go very John Keel on this, who was one of my big influences early on in the 70s, and say that, I've come to a point where I think there is a different level of consciousness that is operating in our world, and that at least a portion of the phenomena that we experience is somehow connected or related to that. Sticking just to this black-eyed kid phenomena, looking at so many reports over the years, I can see this evolution, and it's a very bizarre thing because looking at the overall picture, it gives the impression that whatever is behind it is continually evolving and sort of screwing with us to a certain degree. And, obviously I don't have an absolute answer as to how exactly this plays in with the alien phenomena or anything else. I mean, that's a whole different track we could go down. But if you look historically, going back as long as we have documented evidence, we see a continual evolution of contact from something, I believe. And it's usually defined and determined by the time period or the cultural or religious perceptions of the people recording the accounts. So, we get reports of devils and demons, and, in modern times we get alien Greys that sort of fill that same sinister role. We get fairies and the wee people at one point in history. So it's a constantly evolving something, as I said, that I believe is coming from a different consciousness.
Good stuff. Now I want to tie it in with, I understand both of you have investigated Mothman and Point Pleasant. Did you find any of those encounters of allegedly this creature compelling, or do you find that the existence of a Mothman complete rubbish? What's your view on Mothman, gentlemen?
Oh, I think it's pretty fascinating. I'll let Dave speak for a moment because he's a West Virginia native. So we have both spent a lot of time in Point Pleasant, but I'll let him ramble for a minute.
Yeah, please, Dave.
Yeah, I grew up here in West Virginia and been to Point Pleasant many, many times. And in recent years, me and David Weatherly became good friends, and we've spent a lot of time up there recently in the last few years. And that place, let me tell you, is just one of those areas that it pretty much runs the whole gamut of the paranormal / supernatural realm, if you will. You've got reports of unknown flying creatures and, man-like creatures in the air. You've got reports of UFOs. You've got reports of Bigfoot, dogmen, lizard men. I mean, you name it, it's there, haunting. And it's just one of those areas, for whatever reason, we could discuss all the possible reasons and theories on why certain areas have more paranormal activity than others. But yeah. Point Pleasant is definitely one for the books when it comes to the whole area, the whole supernatural realm. And some of the things that we've came across there, if you've never seen our Point Pleasant investigation that we recently put out, I highly recommend it because we experienced some of that strange phenomena firsthand, and really in multiple areas of the fields. I mean, in a few days' time that we spent up there on that particular investigation, it blew my mind. And I've been doing this for 30 plus years, and David's got over 40 years, and we're still perplexed. And not really perplexed.
What blew your mind? What blew your mind, Dave?
Well, we came across the only thing I could describe as, you hear about all the cattle mutilations and whatnot in ufology, and I've been in the hunting and an outdoorsman my whole life. I've hunted and fished my whole entire life. We came across a carcass of a white-tailed deer like I've never seen ever anywhere before. It had all the general descriptions that you would find in cattle mutilations. It was surgically cut. There was no insect activity on this thing, no bullet wounds, no human or animal foot tracks of any sort around this thing. And we circumvented this animal in a 50-yard radius trying to find any sign of any kind of activity that would explain how it got there and what happened to it, and we could not do it. It was as if it was dropped from the air, just like you hear with all these different cattle and sheep mutilations going on throughout the UFO community. And that was just one of the things that we experienced that really blew our mind. I mean, and then, go ahead, David, tell them the rest if you want to.
Well, that was kind of the first part of this. I mean, and I don't think Dave mentioned, now this animal mutilation was back.
Yes, I was going to come on to that. Yeah, I was interested in the mutilation. That's what I was building to. Yeah, about it.
Yeah, so it was back around the bunkers. I mean, this was early December, and there was no snow on the ground or anything. But it was a very quiet time of year. It was very quiet out there. We were driving around just in preparation for an investigation that night around some of the bunkers, and there was no one at all back there. Now, the area where we found the mutilation, it was on dirt and rock, so it was easy. We walked around ourselves and left tracks, so there should have been some kind of tracks. It was in a pull-off area just off the road, and there was just nothing at all there. Now, as we were widening our scope, trying to find signs of something, because we were just looking for something to logically explain this carcass. We kept sort of going back to it, and you know, it registered in different levels, as these things do, because, you know, I walked back over at one point, you know, we had noted that no scavengers had touched this thing. Now, the area out around the bunkers, there are, there's buzzards and crows, there's coyotes, there's all kinds of things that should have been picking that carcass over, and nothing had touched it. I bent down at one point and was looking really closely at it. I looked at Dave and I said, there are no signs of insect activity on this thing. Now that in itself is also bizarre. So as we widened our scope trying to find a trace of something, you know, I was out in the dirt road, sort of almost on the other side, when I heard Dave kind of saying, you know, calling my attention to something. He pointed down the road in front of us, and there was this strange-looking animal coming out from the right side of the trees, and it you know, it looked like one of these Texas blue dogs, you know, the Texas Chupacabra. It was clearly sort of, it was either heavily manged or didn't really have much of any fur at all. It had a very long tail. It was moving in this very odd sort of loping movement. Although it was not injured, clearly, it was just the way it moved, and it was slinking across the road. Now, it stopped in the middle of the road, and it was looking at us, and fortunately, we had a GoPro camera in the windshield of the car running. Now, sadly, as happens with a lot of these things, you know, it's a distant shot, but you can make out the figure, you know, well enough and see what we're describing and what we experienced. We, of course, got in the car and tried to creep up on this thing to see if we could get it to stay still for a few minutes, but it darted over onto the other side of the road and quickly disappeared into the woods.
So, what do you think it was? What do you think it was, guys?
Well, it's definitely a canid. I mean, you know, definitely. Unfortunately, we didn't get that close to it to, you know, to do an in-depth you know, examination of the thing, and it was moving away from us, but it was acting unlike any other dog, wild dog, whatever you want to call it, that I've ever seen. And, you know, going back to the deer carcass, you know, it was warm enough to where there should have been insect activity. There was none. There was hardly any rigor mortis in on this deer, because I picked up the leg and it was still, you know, fairly limp, so it was a fresh kill. This would happen no later than the night before, no earlier than the night before we got there. This thing wasn't even stiff yet, and it was just one of those bizarre things. I mean, this thing was cut with like laser-like precision right down the middle of its skull. There was no hair, no flesh on the one side of it, of the skull, all the way down to where the neck, the vertebrae meet the rib cage. And it was just sliced open perfectly with no meat.
There was no blood.
No blood anywhere.
Did you get this examined in any way or analyzed in any way?
No, we did not. Given the location and, you know, the difficulty of trying, we had no way to move the thing for one issue. You know, we just documented with photographs as much as we could, but and footage, but no, there was, you know, Point Pleasant's kind of a remote area to even consider trying to get that thing analyzed. I mean, you know, you'd be looking at someone.
Yeah, plus you have to take into account that, you know, if we picked up a deer carcass and tried to move it without, you know, you're talking about breaking the game laws and everything else, we would have had to find a game warden and all this other rigmarole that we didn't have the time nor means to do at the actual location we were at. So, unfortunately, you know, hindsight's 20/20, but it just played out like that, and we documented it the best we could.
Okay, so when we look at the Chupacabra, one of the and you touched on it, I think there, one of the most common. The problem I have when I study cryptozoology is I look for and I want to put this to you guys and see what you think. I look for a pedigree. So when I'm investigating these creatures, often on my own time and money, I'm like, how much do I want to investigate this creature, and how plausible it is? And the problem, as a starting point, one of the reasons I've never really touched on this subject is because I can't see a historical lineage that I'm comfortable with in terms of the Chupacabra. And also many people say, well, it's a dog with mange, or give some other, or it's an urban myth. What are your views, gentlemen, on that subject? What do you think the Chupacabra is?
I find the whole Chupacabra thing pretty fascinating because it's layered. I think that there are some physical aspects to it. There's a lot of folklore that has become involved over time. It's a unique cryptid in that there are very distinct, different versions of it. As anybody knows who's looked into it just a little bit, we've got the whole Puerto Rican Chupacabra, which is bipedal, and then we've got this one that is seen a lot in the Southwest. Now, honestly, I think a lot of these sightings, probably the better portion of these sightings in the Southwest, they are likely some kind of hybrid animal. And, very, very few people, probably more people in our field, but very few people in general are used to seeing animals with mange because it completely changes the appearance. If you've got some kind of a weird hybrid that may be affecting, the viability of the species, then that is likely what a lot of these canids are. How they behave and what's happening to them as they continue to evolve and develop, I can't say. And then, I can throw the whole other aspect into this and say, well, historically, we've got so many sightings through the ages of bizarre creatures. What if there's some other kind of explanation for where these things are coming from? And that really would send us down the rabbit hole. And again, that's a conversation for a whole evening.
Yeah. I think it's all right. I think it's definitely a possibility. They find new species every day in this world. Just recently, recent years, the coy wolf, cross between wolf and domesticated dogs are running rampant. And, yeah, anything's possible to me, and that's the way I look at it. So when
we're looking at your mode of operation on these creatures, what's your objective? When you investigate things, are you looking to solve personal curiosity, or are you looking for scientific evidence, or are you looking because you're both authors? What drives you in terms of your investigations as the Society of the Supernatural?
For me, it's just my personal passion. I got interested in the supernatural and strange things when I was a kid, and I've just pursued it ever since then. I broach a lot of sides of it. I try to collect evidence as best I can. I look for personal experiences, and as I stated, it's just my passion to pursue these things. The one thing I'm not out to do is to try to prove this to other people, because I just I don't think that's my role. I put my information out there when I write, and people can do what they please with it. But there's the old adage that a believer doesn't need proof, and you'll never convince a skeptic. So that's my take on it. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I do this because of several experiences I had as a young man, and it just propelled me into further researching and investigating these things, and it's just, it became my passion. Like David said, it became a passion and a hobby gone wild because, for me, it's some of man's greatest questions. What happens to us when we die? Are there unknown creatures walking among us, and are we alone in the universe? To me, those are three of man's greatest questions that haven't fully been answered, and I'm searching for maybe a small piece of that puzzle. And I like to share whatever I capture with folks, and they can make their own mind up. I'm not here to try to prove to them either. Make up your own mind. Here's what we get. We throw it out there. If they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. Make up your own mind.
Okay, good stuff. So basically, I think in synopsis, what you're saying is, this is our personal passion, and we throw our evidence out, and it's up to you what you think of it. But we're here to answer questions to satisfy our own curiosity. Would that be a fair synopsis of what you're telling me?
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, that's fair.
Good stuff. Now, what I'm interested in, I just want to tie a couple of these things back, because I'm sort of building to a general point that from my own intellectual curiosity, I'm interested in what your view is. So just going back to the Mothman, the creature, gentleman itself, obviously you've given this some thought. What and I was putting this to Lon Strickler the other day, I'm always interested in what people's opinions are who have done a lot of investigation as to what these things boil down to. So what do you think Mothman is? I'm going to ask David and then Dave, so I want you to answer individually if you don't mind, please.
Sure.
I think the Mothman was a manifestation. And what I mean by that is that I think it is something that was, in a sense, unique to its time or unique to the circumstances that were unfolding. But, I currently, and granted, with how much research and investigation I do, this opinion may change in a couple of months. But, my standing on it is sort of that Mothman was a manifestation of the collective consciousness of the people in Point Pleasant. And it was a result of the events that were unfolding there and the tension that was sort of in the air from the pending disaster. Because I think that without getting into, the other more esoteric or psychic phenomena and so forth, I think that a lot of people have a sense of when something serious is coming or something's going to change. So in the sense that I'm talking about, I hope I'm making sense to you, I think that the Mothman may have been a type of tulpa, a manifestation of something realized to try to shake people awake and warn people that something significant was coming.
So a tulpa is a thought form, yes?
It is. The difference being that, tulpa is a Tibetan word, and it is a being that manifests in the full physical form, even though it initiates in thought. So it begins in the mind, has an image, merely held in the mind, and it goes through stages of manifestation until it becomes completely physical.
Okay, good stuff. Dave, what do you think?
Well, that's a tough one for me. You hear from cultures all around the world that have seen the Mothman prior to mega disasters and many people dying and whatnot. It's hard. It's a hard one for me to put my finger on. Me personally, I don't know. I would almost lean to some type of interdimensional being, maybe that relates to some type of watcher or whatnot. That is sent here to warn people in some aspect for whatever reason. For me, I would have to lean to that side of things. But having not ever seen that particular creature, I'm just trying to throw it out there. That would be my best guess. Totally just throwing it out there. Without any proof or knowledge of having not seen the creature myself.
No, I'm just interested in your opinion. I'm not gonna hold you to it. I'm interested in what you think. Okay, so there's a tangential point, and then I'll lead on to the point that I really wanted to ultimately focus on in this section of your interview. So you both mentioned interdimensions. You both touched on aliens. I mean, what are these greys? What do you think these grey aliens are, and what do they want, gentlemen?
Dave, take that one.
All right. Well, for me, I think any extraterrestrial that folks have had encounters with, whether it be a close encounter or just a sighting, it would be almost asinine, if you will, to not, as an educated person, to think that the possibility of ETs visiting the Earth or in a relative possibility mathematically, they're discovering new planets every day. There's those of the mindset that claim there's 6 or 7 or 8 different races of aliens on Earth with us right now. Are they here to help us, learn and grow as a race? Are we some type of DNA experiment put here by the Greys? I don't know. But, to me it's all fascinating, man. I mean, I know I've seen, I was in the Air Force for 8 years, active duty, and I saw things in the sky. I was present during the Phoenix Lights incident. I was stationed in Tucson, Arizona, and something really went down that night. And I know for myself that, for me, I believe it's 100%, 100% without a doubt that there are advanced civilizations visiting this earth and have been for thousands of years. For me, it's a no-brainer. Whether they want, I don't know.
Do either of you think that they are? Let's just focus on the Greys. We can move away just slightly, if you will, from the other alleged alien species. Greys, are they tied in with black-eyed children, with Mothman, with Chupacabra? You see, one of the question I'm building to you, and again I'd like both of you to answer, if you will, is that there seems to be an underlying strand when you talk about interdimensional creatures and entities, that there's some sort of composite intelligence behind this, or is there? And if so, what does it want? Because these things, when you describe them in your studies, you seem to see a degree of connection between them. So I'm wondering if you've considered if there's anything behind them, any single unifying entity, force, agenda, if you like, and if so, what might it be? So if either of you or both of you could answer that, I'd be really interested, because that was what I wanted to build to, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of addressed that a little bit earlier on, this sense that there's a greater consciousness behind a lot of this phenomena in general. I was speaking earlier about the black-eyed children, but really that can be applied on a lot of levels. I think one of the things that happened in our field that I saw throughout my history of being involved in these things is that there was a time when a lot of this phenomena was being segregated by investigators. Everyone sort of wanted their piece of the pie. And, the ufologists wanted nothing to do with the people studying Bigfoot, and the people studying Bigfoot wanted nothing to do with the people studying other things. So, there was a period of time where there were a lot of reports that were slipping under the radar because, back in the day, if you called MUFON and started talking to them about a UFO sighting, they were very interested. But if you mentioned, oh, by the way, there was a Sasquatch in my backyard when this was happening, they would tell you to go call the Bigfoot people. We're not interested. But if you flip that and you call the Bigfoot people and you tell them about the Sasquatch, as soon as you mention UFOs, you get, oh, we don't wear tinfoil hats. You need to go talk to those guys. And the point I'm making with that is that, for a period of time, a lot of these reports sort of went under the radar because everyone wanted to segregate the phenomena. And I think that does a disservice because there are so many areas and there's so many incidents when this phenomena does cross over with each other. And it doesn't mean that you have to leap to a radical conclusion and say, well, flying saucers are dropping off Bigfoot, all over the country. No, we're not saying that at all. We're saying let's look at the collective experience that people are having with these different ranges of this phenomena and question exactly what's behind it. And that's something I've always tried to do since I started in this field in the 70s is approach it with a very holistic view, and even encompassing in, things like folklore and ancient mysteries and so forth, because we have to question, why there are times that phenomena is connected and why are some people prone to see more different things and others not. I do personally believe that at least in a portion of these cases, there is some greater consciousness or something different that is going on. And that may be an aspect of our higher consciousness, of our minds or our energy that we don't quite understand yet that is perceiving these things, at least some of us, whereas others are shut down. And for me, it kind of loops back to the whole approach, from a shamanic perspective for me, because tribal cultures, they always take a holistic view of this stuff. And you talk to them, and there's just a simple acknowledgement. Yeah, we know about Bigfoot. Yeah, we know about, visitors from the stars. So I think the first step, I don't have an ultimate answer for your question because, we just don't know exactly what's behind it. But I think the initial approach should be in looking at all of this stuff in a more open-minded manner.
Okay, thank you, David. David, what did you want to say?
Well, David pretty much covered it. We're a lot of the same mindset, but as investigators, you have to take a look at the whole ball of wax. You have to step outside the box and take it all in. You got to check out the who, what, where, when, and why. You have to take it all in, the folklore. Just like David said, you have to put it all in and look at the big picture of things, because a lot of this does cross over, just as David said. There's thousands and thousands of reports out there that mention UFOs and Bigfoots involved at the same time, and so many other different similar situations. You have to, as investigators and researchers, to look at that big picture, because that's what we're all, in the end, that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to get a little piece of that puzzle. We're trying to figure out, what the hell is going on here. And if you didn't, you'd be doing the whole field and yourselves a disservice by not doing it in that particular manner, because it does correlate a lot. There's a ton of correlation. There's a lot of crossover, and you have to do that. And there is no answer at this point in time. That's what we're all trying to do here. We're trying to find those answers, trying to find that piece of the puzzle and move forward, whether we ever will or not, whether we're supposed to know or not. That's the overlooming question here. Are we supposed to know answers to these things? I don't know, but we're trying really hard.
What's fascinating, Adam, is that, Dave and I both separately and and with our organization, Society of the Supernatural, we get contacted all the time by people who are very hesitant and somewhat, reluctant. They want to talk to someone, but they're hesitant because once we get the story out of them, the initial part may be, I think my farm is haunted. And they'll start telling us about the phenomena. And once we get them to a level where they're comfortable, then they'll drop the other bomb and they'll say, well, we're also seeing a Sasquatch on the property. And,
Absolutely.
That's just an example. We hear these kind of things all the time. We'll hear the opposite. My property seems to have a Sasquatch on it. Oh, by the way, we keep seeing what we think are UFOs or ghost lights or something in the sky. And, people became conditioned. It's really weird what's happened in the field, because the paranormal in general has become more acceptable. It's more part of pop culture than it ever has been. But there's still a lot of built-in reluctance. And, while people are comfortable talking about some things, when they start mixing too much together, they're afraid, again, that they're going to be seen as a nut job, or, that they don't, that they need medication or whatever.
Taking a skeptical position, if I'm seeing ghosts and UFOs in the same place, people are going to, people would say, their classic reaction is, come on, must be a fantasist, delusional, and a number of different things, none of which are pleasant. How, gentlemen, when you're interviewing somebody, do you assess their credibility? That's what I'm interested in as a sort of, if you like, a lawyer. How do you make an assessment? If somebody said to me, I've got to say, if somebody said to me, well, I've got a UFO and a ghost knocking around in my house area, I would be highly skeptical. How do you evaluate their credibility?
Well, for me, having a law enforcement background, I will, when I talk to these folks, I'll put them through a series of questions similar to a law enforcement type interview, and then I will ask them, the same questions over and over again in a different manner to where they don't even realize it. And 9 times out of 10, we've been doing this long enough where we can usually spot someone who is making things up, or if, possibly, they're on medications and whatnot, because that's one of the questions I always ask. And it doesn't change my view of them, but it helps us to know, hey, are you taking any psychotropic medications? Are you seeing a psychologist? You have to ask folks those types of questions. It doesn't necessarily mean they're not experiencing this, because many cases in hauntings and so on and so forth have been misdiagnosed as a mental illness when these folks are really experiencing paranormal type events in their home. So you have to look at the whole picture. And, when you put these folks through interviews, when you've been doing this long enough, we can usually pick them out. Hey, they're trying to get a TV show, or they're just making stuff up because they want some attention. But, there's always a few that slip through the cracks when you actually get to their house or, their location. You can 99.9% of the time, feel them out and see what's going on. It's just the way, it just comes from experience, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and there's sort of,
there's
layer after layer. I'm sorry?
Yeah, what was going to say? When you've got somebody there and you think that they're a fantasist or you think they're delusional, how do you approach them? What sort of things would you say to them? Would you challenge them? Would you just say, well, I don't think that interview is worth evaluating? How do you assess or challenge their behaviour?
Well, like I said, we put them through a questionnaire, and we ask the same questions but in a different manner, and 9 times out of 10, if they're lying, then you're going to catch them.
Yeah. Now,
I use police interrogation techniques when I do it. So.
And how often do you find eyewitnesses that you feel aren't telling the truth? Is it unusual? Is it common? What in your experience are you finding?
For people who are not telling the truth? Is that what you were saying?
Well, generally, when you're interviewing eyewitnesses, how often do you find people fabricating things? Just from your own experience, it's obviously a long time.
It happens on it's not constant, but, fairly regularly we get those. And quite honestly, for me, they don't usually make it past the first stage or two because, I'm always interested in hearing accounts and different cases and so forth. But with the extent that I travel and investigate and research, I really try to put these people through a few layers of, discussion and contact before I get really serious about it. And I find that most of the time these people reveal themselves fairly quickly if they're fabricating because most of the time they will quickly escalate what they're telling you to try to get your attention because most of them, they want an automatic, excited response. They want you to come running to their house, whether they're, whatever end of the country or planet they're on. And, they want their, they want the attention. They want to know if you're going to get them on TV or something like that. And, we'll get these reports and they will quickly escalate, we'll hear, I'm hearing a lot of noises and disembodied voices. And then, the next day we get another communication. There's things being thrown around the room. And then we get, I was shoved out of my bed and this happened and that happened. So they quickly escalate because what they want is your undivided attention. And it simply doesn't work that way. If someone is serious and they genuinely want help, then they're going to answer the same questions. They're going to answer any questions you pose to them. Usually people that are fabricating will sidestep certain questions. They'll make a lot of claims that they don't back up. I caught a ghost face in a photograph, or I caught a Sasquatch, peering in my window, and these types of things. But then, they'll say they have it photographed, and then it didn't. It's gone, or it's not clear, or, you get all kinds of things like that. And usually through these stages of contact, they pretty much always reveal themselves.
Good stuff. Now, one of the things that I wanted to touch on you investigated jinn, I believe. Is that right? You've looked into the jinn phenomenon?
Yes. I did a whole chapter on the jinn in Strange Intruders.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what they are and what you've investigated? Because I was interested in that.
Yeah, so the jinn are a unique manifestation in that, they really are rooted in religious belief. And, back to the creation myth that is connected to Islam. The jinn, for those not familiar with the term, in westernized language, it's often a genie. And that's a bit deceptive to think about it in those terms simply because of this. Most people, when you say genie in the Western world, it usually brings to mind one of a couple things. Either, the big blue guy that's really happy from Disney and is helping, or if you're a little bit older like me, it brings to mind Barbara Eden, in her harem pants, bungling all of her magic up in I Dream of Genie. Now, neither one is anywhere near accurate, because when you probe into the mythology and you start to come to an understanding about the jinn, you realize that there's a much more sinister aspect to these entities. And the jinn, they go back to the Islamic creation story that involves Allah creating three races. He created humans, angels, and jinn. And it says in the religious text that the jinn were created from smokeless flame. Now, a lot of people, visualize that as sort of almost a plasma type of looking energy, or as a black, undulating mass of energy or something like that. Now, one of the things that I point out when I lecture about the jinn is this. In the tenets of Islam, if you're a good Muslim, it's dictated that you must believe everything that is written in the Quran. Now, let that sink in for a moment and consider this. Islam is the fastest growing religion on the planet. So all of those people, if they are good Muslims, then they believe in the existence of the jinn. Now, that alone should be something for us to consider when we're looking at cases involving possible jinn manifestations, because, we have now millions and millions of people on the planet who believe in the existence of these things. So we're kind of full circle to what we were talking about earlier with this idea of the collective consciousness and what it can bring into manifestation. And, when you start looking at cases involving the jinn, which there are a lot more of those now, because for over 10 years we've had a military presence in the Middle East. And, we've had all these Westerners who have gone to the Middle East and have no understanding, really, for the most part, of what these things are, of what the jinn potentially are. And they're bringing back artifacts. They're bringing back things that are, quote, enchanted with a jinn or hold a jinn prisoner and so forth. And, the typical mythical idea, of course, is that, it's a lamp that holds a genie. But when you go back to the ancient lore, you find that jinn could be bound to any number of things, not just lamps, but jewelry, rings, necklaces, a whole wide range of things. And we also come full circle because when you start delving into the lore of the jinn, you find out that they, according to Islam, they dwell here but not exactly, because what happened in the mythos is that they refused to bow down to the superiority of man, and Allah banished them. But he didn't destroy them, he just banished them, which means they're still here, they're just not exactly in our dimension, even though they can interact with us. Because of this banishment, the jinn in general dislike humans and do everything they can to try to cause trouble for mankind.
Thank you for that. One last question, and I just want to talk about, so if we can make this fairly brief, and then I want to talk about what you're doing next and a couple of your books, if I may. You mentioned earlier on, that there are some places are more sensitive of activities than others. Why do you think that is, guys? Why are some places more sensitive activities like Point Pleasant? What is it?
There's no set answer for that other than it seems like some of the places on Earth that are higher in geomagnetical activity, meaning that the magnetical pull of the Earth is stronger. You seem to get a lot of these areas that have more paranormal activity than others. Also, a lot of it has to do with the ley lines in the Earth, and several other factors would seem to lend a little bit into that. There's a lot of study being done on that as we speak. A lot of people are really looking into that and have been looking into that for many years. A lot of folks believe that the crystalline in the Earth has a lot to do with that. Quartz and several other factors figure in there too. High energy areas, if you will.
Mm-hmm. So we're not really sure. There's a number of different explanations, but we're not really sure.
Right, exactly.
Good stuff. Now, moving on to both of you individually. I mean, is there any? Obviously, you're published. Both of you just want to tell people a little bit about what books you have which are published, and where they can get hold of what you're doing and what you're up to next.
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I'm proud to say I'm releasing my first book anytime now. It should be available on Amazon. It is a book detailing the West Virginia Bigfoot. Because that's what led me into doing what I do, an experience I had with my grandfather back in 1983 here on the Gauley River in West Virginia. And that's what started me into the fray, paranormal investigating. And you can get that on Leprechaun Productions on Amazon.
Thank you. David?
So we've got, Society of the Supernatural has a number of DVDs out. Those are available if you just search one of our websites. There'll be links to it. There's also they're also available on eBay, and the Point Pleasant DVD we discussed is available on there, as well as a few others that we've done. My books, I've got quite a range of them out at this point. Black-Eyed Children, of course, that we talked about earlier, as well as Strange Intruders. All of my books can be found at Amazon.com. The Would Not series is up to 3 volumes now. There's a new one coming from me this summer with another with co-author Ross Allison, and it is on haunted ships and lighthouses. That'll be out probably late summer, early fall. And I've got several other projects in the works, too. There's a book coming about cryptids in Nevada, which a lot of people think, oh, really? Yeah, really. So I'm always working, always writing, and always lots of projects unfolding. Amazon.com is the best place to find my stuff.
Together? Good stuff. And what about you working together at the Society of the Supernatural? What's next for you as an organization?
Well, we sponsored a conference in June, first annual Mountain State Supernatural Convention, and that was a pretty big success. So we're talking about doing that next year again. Yeah. And Society of Supernatural, really the idea of that is to be a collective of sort of modeled after the old London Ghost Club, and we want to have people in the organization that has some experience and has some significant things to say. We're proud to have added some people this year. Ross Allison, I mentioned, is a member. Rosemary Ellen Guiley, and a whole range. What else we got coming up, Dave?
Eric Altman. We just added Eric Altman. We got a lot of projects. We'll be finishing up the next 2 volumes of the Mothman very soon. The Point Pleasant Files. We've got a lot of projects in the works coming out for folks to partake in. And I myself am, working with David on. We have several book projects coming up in the near future. So, we're trying to. We've got a lot of years of experience, a lot of things we want to get out there to folks, and share our experiences with folks and our research and our investigations, and that's what it's all about for us.
Good stuff. Well, I'd like to thank you both very much for being on the show tonight. We've covered a number of top subjects. and it's been a fascinating talk. So on behalf of the show, on behalf of Mike and I, thank you, David. Thank you, Dave, for being on the show tonight. I really appreciate you as guests. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for having us.
Good stuff. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much. And we'll see you soon.